I've been going back and rewatching a short series of podcasts I did in 2020 with Mikey, aka The Cheat. It was called Taking Stock, a reference to our long shared experience in the competitive Melee community. It's still there on the YouTube channel if you want to check it out. For those who haven't been around as long, Mikey was a coworker of mine at Bravest Esports, the company that started this YouTube channel and then handed it over to me once they went under for me to rebrand as Squid School. By then, he had already gone on to work at a very cool organization called Beyond the Summit, a production company that started out as a casting studio for Dota 2. I got to know them from their Smash Summit events, where they ran a voting process to get the top players that people wanted to watch, all living in the same very large house for a week. It involved a very intense tournament, but it was so much more than just a high-level invitational. They ran side events, they used these players as actors in comedic sketches showcasing their personalities, and they had these long conversations with 4 or 5 major personalities of the community on a big comfy couch. You'd be watching these analysts and commentators on the couch after a set just finished, and then you'd see the player who lost come out of the room where they were playing the set and see their reaction, see them get a drink, see who they talked to, and then they'd walk by the couch on their way out, and the casters would call out a question as they passed, and they'd sit and talk about what was on their minds. See, in-person esports events are just something you have to experience to really get it. You've just got to go and see them. I can show you videos from them of people getting hyped and jumping up out of their chairs in the crowd, but that just makes you look at them and go, wow, those are some crazy fans right there. If you go there and you feel the energy of the place and you watch it culminate in that match on stage, you get why they feel that way. You start to feel that way yourself just a little bit. I look back at the crowd chanting when Axe, a player from my region, had an iconic dominating win in EVO 2014. And it's not the same because I'm not feeling the room itself reverberate from all the noise. I'm not halfway toward losing my voice because of it. It's less present, it's less of an experience I had than an experience someone shared with me through their video camera. Beyond the Summit was a group that got really close to breaking that barrier down. When I watch the players pop off after winning Summit, I feel like I'm there in the room. Not just because of the simple cinematography that frames the scene like you'd see it as a player sitting there watching, but also because we've been hearing these players tell their own stories and live their own stories on camera all week. And this is the culmination of all of that effort. When I saw Axe walk downstairs, having won his first major ever at Smash Summit, and get this hug from his friend, I cried. I can't credit just BTS for that, because having been to in-person tournaments, I knew both of these guys. Ty, the player giving him a hug, taught me a lot about the game in person.
That's another, I think, failure of skill-based matchmaking, that you're only ever going to end up playing against people who are near your level, which we've talked about, why that's going to decrease the amount of growth you experience. But a big part of, how I was able to get that practice with higher level players isn't just that they were there in the room. It's also that I became friends with them. Like, I bribed Ty with food. I took him into the dining hall and used my free passes when I was in college so that he could eat too. And then in exchange, he gave me an hour and a half. That friendship with him opened the door to a lot of other experiences I wouldn't have otherwise had. Because I was with him, I also got to meet X, Y, and Z player in my local community. I also got to go, travel with him and end up in these hotel rooms with really, really good players. And I got to know them as well. It's really, really cool to meet your favorite player. It's a whole other deal to be introduced to your favorite player and for them to acknowledge you as a peer, as someone in the social circle.
Yeah.
When you go to an in-person event, people don't just know your Twitter account or a clip of your gameplay. They know what you look like, how tall you are, how you talk, the way you carry yourself, what you like to eat from the restaurants that you hang out at afterward, and whatever else you actually talk about with people while you're there. It's such a powerful bonding experience to go with a team and meet all these people that have been a part of your life for months or even years for the first time off Discord in this wild new IRL world. Meeting the Grillers and Popgun and InkSync at Genesis 7 and meeting Watercolor and all sorts of different Splatoon TOs at LTC last year are some of the best memories I have in the Splatoon scene. LTC is coming up again this year in May, and signups are still open. Shoutouts to Magic for getting me this trailer to run over the video. I'm happy to promote this event, having not only participated in it, but also casted it before.
Everyone is on this side. This could be a sneaky push. If you go for it, and they don't take so up to 20. But look at that. Lob. Lob and Junior coming back in.
Yeah.
Just came in, unfortunately.
Gotta love it there. Hugs on top of the stage, new teammates as they play on their normal online teams.
All right, I think that solved it. So if y'all can hear that at home, big apologies for that. But
Sloth doing some work in the mid.
That's going to be it.
Pop the basket. Can they find a way to get lead? They do. Can they get one more clam in to avoid overtime going down?
Deviant talking to
And
you know
they
what?
do. Somebody won a game.
So thank you all so much for tuning in and showing your support.
Big in-person LANs are expensive, and you do need to think about safety a little bit, both from COVID and just traveling and being around a lot of strangers, but I've never been to one where the price tag wasn't worth it, and LTC is no different. I think what was really cool about Beyond the Summit for me was that it made ordinary people out of top players. They weren't known for just their gameplay anymore, but also by their personalities and their little idiosyncrasies and their passion. I remember feeling upset at the first tournament where I ever saw someone come up to Axe and ask for his autograph, because that wasn't how our community worked. If you showed up to our events, you weren't a fan, you were our friends. There didn't need to be that distance. A convention, a LAN, it's like taking the experience of going out in public and replacing all the random strangers with insanely cool gamers and personalities you know from the internet. I was on my way to the bathroom once at a tournament, and I had the door held open for me by Armada, one of the top 2 players on Earth at the time. Standing in line to wait for a toilet, I was listening to lively conversations from some of the best-known Smash commentators. I think there's something deeply empowering to not just watch something like that as a passive spectator, but to feel actively involved in it, even on a mundane level, to be a part of it. For those people to turn when they see you and say hi. That's something you get from being there in person. Beyond the Summit brought us a lot closer to experiencing that through a screen than I've ever seen anyone accomplish before. And it made the experience of actually being there so valuable that people spent a lot of real-world money campaigning or donating to campaigns to determine who got to be there. So it's really sad for me that Beyond the Summit is going out of business. They've laid off all of their staff, including my friend Mikey. If you are looking for a really smart, imaginative, innovative production manager with a good sense of ethics and a passion for what he does, hit him up. He's not making it difficult. He's been streaming his job search on Twitch, which has been riveting, by the way.
Do you love where you work? I used to.
Will the tuna cutter position call him back? My eyelids are taped open so I don't miss updates. Beyond the Summit isn't the only esports org that's struggling right now either. For years, venture capitalists and big investors have been acting on the assumption that there's a lot more money in the esports industry than there ever actually was. And now that the economy is starting to hurt and they're realizing the investment hasn't been paying off, they're starting to pull out. A bubble's bursting. We've seen big news of layoffs from 100 Thieves, The Guard, Riot Games, TSM, Team Liquid, lots of major players in the industry all in the last month and a half. I don't raise these points to spread doom and gloom that maybe esports is going away. We will definitely end up rebuilding, or at least building something new. But that's precisely why it's so worth talking about. It's at major transitional periods like this that it's really important for everyone to pause and reflect on the direction that the future takes. I'm looking back at these old podcasts because they're a great snapshot of what our goals and vision were back in the early pandemic times. Another moment of hardship that drastically reshaped our scene, more so in Melee because in-person events were even more a part of that culture than in Splatoon. The Splatoon scene to this day barely runs any in-person events on its own, piggybacking instead on major Smash tournaments because they've already got a big infrastructure for doing exactly what we need to do. That's not to discredit the in-person locals we do run and the production companies we do have, but it's important to recognize the context we're in and the size we're at. One thing I'm proud of the Melee community for is that they started grassroots and have remained so. In some ways, that's less to our credit than it is to Nintendo's discredit for their, at best, indifference to competition and at worst, direct sabotage of it. Nintendo interacts with competitive play insofar as it can be an advertisement for their products. There may be people at the company who understand in-person community around esports, but weighing the actions of the company itself, I feel very comfortable in saying that the corporation of Nintendo has no clue about why it should value in-person esports the way I've laid out so far. They are worried about their shareholders too much to risk anything from their brand being the tiniest bit misaligned from their current vision for it. And until that changes, the underground anti-establishment punks who built Melee from the ground up just don't have sufficient common interests with that worldview for them to work together. Beyond the Summit is a massive loss, but I think the Melee community is more capable of sustaining it than most esports. And I think their proportion of esports market share will grow during these downtimes because they've never been propped up by big money interests in as foundational ways other communities have been. Splatoon has a similar grassroots infrastructure, even if we don't have quite the same fight in us that the Melee community does today. One thing we have going for us that I don't think anyone else has is our successful commitment to inclusivity. There are just proportionally more women who play Splatoon than compete in any other esport. This game's community identifies in a big way with gender diversity, and homophobic or transphobic ideology gets shut down sooner and more decisively than I've seen anywhere else. That's not to say we don't have any problems with issues of prejudice, but they're being addressed better than any other esports community is addressing them right now. And in that respect, I want Splatoon to be big enough that we serve as an example to other scenes. We won Multiplayer Game of the Year at the Game Awards, so eyes turned to us in that moment. Our game is still fairly new and still getting content. It's a good time for us to try some big new ideas, to come up with solutions nobody's tried before, to make a name for ourselves outside of our usual audiences. So where am I going with this? I'll admit it's been a little freeform, because there are a lot of thoughts circulating in my head about it all, but I think I definitely want to say rest in peace to Beyond the Summit, and that we should all try to learn what we can from what they did to keep their legacy going. I want us to keep experimenting and developing more independence as a scene from other communities and Nintendo. Sign up for LTC, and for the love of Pete, could someone please hire Mikey before he settles for becoming a fishmonger?